I'm not a historian, but I heard that every revolution involved a hungry proletariat. They can hide data, but they can't take away hunger. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I heard some really concerning news yesterday. Actually, let me back up a little bit more. I want to talk about two different stories, and both of them are going to relate directly to this comment. The first one is a piece that came out a couple of days ago on October 14th. Trump canceled 94 million pounds of food aid. Here's what never arrived. This is from ProPublica. ProPublica has done consistently excellent reporting. I really encourage you to go support their journalism. Really, really good and necessary work that they're doing right now. On a sweltering day in Vidalia, Louisiana, Shannon Cornwell and Freddie Green got in a long line to wait for food. The couple had struggled to pay for groceries amid soaring prices and health setbacks, they said. She had back surgery. He had undergone cancer treatment. They turned to a local food bank to supplement their diets. Although they're grateful for the food, lately they noticed changes in what they received. For months in the spring and summer, their pickups did not include any meat. Now, I talked about this earlier in the year, but Donald Trump yanked away about $500 million of food bank funding that helped hungry people get eggs, dairy, and meat. This is food that was distributed through the Emergency Food Assistance Program. Back in May, the regime halted deliveries of 2% milk to 31 states and then expanded so that by the end of September, more than 4,300 deliveries of meat, eggs, and dairy were denied to hungry people in all 50 states, Puerto Rico, and D.C. Let's look at North Carolina. Both of their senators, Ted Budd and Tom Tillis, are Republicans. Donald Trump canceled 97 shipments of emergency food aid to North Carolina between May and September. That's almost 3 million pounds of food. If you live in North Carolina, you might let your Republican senators know how you feel about that. We already know that disproportionately it is Republican states that are negatively impacted, hungry people in Republican states who are the most impacted by the cruel and chaotic and erratic actions of the Trump regime. All told, between May and the end of September, the Trump regime held back 94 million pounds of food from hungry Americans. Donald Trump and his America First policy. Donald Trump is giving $40 billion of our tax money to bail out Argentina. I mean, really, that's far more about bailing out the hedge funds that are operating in Argentina. Argentina is now our prime competitor with China for soybean contracts. So it hurts our soybean farmers. We're pumping tens of billions of dollars into another country under Donald Trump's America First policy. And under Donald Trump's America First policy, hungry Americans have 94 million pounds of food denied to them, held back. This is food that had already been budgeted for, by the way. Congress had already allocated funds for this emergency food aid. Let's get back to that couple using the food bank of Central Louisiana, because Donald Trump deprived that particular food bank of $400,000 worth of dried cranberries, dried plums, milk, eggs, cheese, pork, and chicken. And unfortunately, in Republican states like Louisiana, they don't get very much state funding. They rely very heavily on federal funding for their food banks. States like mine in Oregon are far more committed to feeding our hungry residents. It is Republican states on every level that end up getting the short end of the stick because we see the kind of cruel callousness, bootstraps ideology of Republicans on a state level depriving food pantries, food banks of funding. And then the Trump regime yanks back deliveries that they had promised. And these food banks are in a real hard position. This is the greatness that they envision for America. This is their America First policy. The Food Bank of Central Louisiana assured ProPublica that they aren't turning anybody away, but they're giving out about half as much food. So previously, people would get about a 25-pound package of food when they showed up, and now it's about 12 pounds. We are finding the need for food bank assistance growing all around the country. Food prices have gone up 38% or more. People are losing their jobs, rent is increasing, utilities are increasing significantly all over the country. As we move into winter and people have to face heating costs, more and more folks are going to have to choose between staying warm and having a full belly. In the richest country on earth, ProPublica says there's not an option B. Cuts and changes to foundational federal programs for low-income people, namely SNAP and Medicaid, are looming. The increase in need, even before these changes take effect, could signal that food banks are a canary in the coal mine for what's to come. We already know that our economy, including the AI bubble that's going to be bursting anytime now, our economy is basically held together with a wish and a prayer. If we watch that implode, we're going to have an awful lot of hungry people. And the social safety nets that provided for those who are on the margins and are struggling and are most at risk, the Trump regime has gutted all of those to give billionaires a giant tax break. Republicans are cutting SNAP by $187 billion. That is 20% by 2034. Could you take away 1/5 of your food and still function? How would you do if 20% of your food disappeared? And then you couldn't go to the food bank to get extra because they've watched their funds be cut. Republicans have this false belief that people who are on SNAP, people who visit food banks, are just lazy. As somebody who had to utilize a food bank and as somebody who also belonged to a gleaners organization for many years, people who utilize those services are living on the margins. They need that food to feed themselves and their children, and they are overwhelmingly employed and working very hard. Food bank resources help give people a measure of economic mobility so that they have a chance to escape poverty. There is no reason in the wealthiest nation on earth that millions of Americans have to decide about whether or not they can put gas in their car or food on their tables, whether or not they can pay their utility bill or put food on the table. So this news was already really bad. Food banks are watching their budgets cut massively. The Trump regime is holding back 94 million pounds of food. SNAP is being cut. School lunch programs are being cut. And then we heard this week some really disturbing news. Brooke Rollins, who heads up the USDA, and y'all know how I feel about Brooke Rollins. She's the one who said that if we round up all of our immigrant farm workers, that people on Medicaid should just go work the fields in order to pay for their Medicaid. Disabled Americans, your granny in a nursing home, that they should go pick cabbage and tomatoes and strawberries. And that will solve the labor crisis of stuffing all of our hardworking, highly skilled immigrant farm laborers into concentration camps. She also said if you're bummed out about the high cost of eggs and you're struggling to feed your family, just get some chickens. You know, in your apartment. Most Americans live in cities, so like in your apartment, just get some chickens and stop bitching about the fact that you can't afford eggs. This is who is running the USDA and is somebody whose work was focused around sustainable food systems, food justice, before all of this madness. I hate this woman. I hate her. Right? RFK Jr., like at the top of my list. Brooke Rollins, she's way up there in the way that she's devastating our farms. She's making America's farm crisis worse. She's making Americans hungrier. She's unbelievably incompetent and incredibly, incredibly dangerous. Welcome to Kakistocracy. So Brooke Rollins, sorry, I got to go on a rant about her every time. I have to look at her face and read about something terrible that she's done. She announced that food stamp funding will be cut off starting at the beginning of November. Because of the partial government shutdown, they've decided that one of the ways they're going to squeeze the American people and try to, I don't know, flip public opinion toward the regime, right? So Donald Trump wants Republicans to be seen as the heroes in this situation. He wants to be seen as a hero in this situation. He wants us to blame the Democrats. They think the way to do that is to take away food stamps from 42 million Americans. This is a good time for those of you that don't realize how many Americans are living on the edge, how many Americans struggle with food insecurity. 42 million. 12.5% of Americans are on food stamps. And Brooke Rollins just wants to turn that off at the beginning of November with critical shortages at food banks. They say there's no money for this, but we just heard yesterday that the Trump regime wants to have big missile exercises in California. Donald Trump wants to build himself an Arc de Triomphe, except it's an Arc de Trump. He's tricking out his Qatari jetliner to the tune of $600 million of American taxpayer money. So how do you feel about that? How do you feel about Donald Trump taking food stamps away from 42 million Americans with 2 weeks' notice? What do you think is going to happen come November? 2 questions. How are we going to take care of each other? And are we great yet?